Hello, I'm James Mossholder. Welcome to my real estate YouTube channel. Today I have a friend with me. His name is Angel. We are going to be talking a little bit about my wholesale business. He has never wholesaled in his life, so he wanted to know why I structured my wholesale business around selling directly to hedge funds. Now, someone might ask, what is a hedge fund? So very simple. A hedge fund is just a fund or a company that runs a fund that pulls in capital investments, maybe from accredited investors or just investors in general, to then deploy it in the real estate space. So oftentimes they do have a big lump sum of money, $500 million, $1 billion, and their goal is to deploy that capital quickly and efficiently. So they come to people like myself, or maybe I go to them knowing what they're looking for, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So to start, again, Angel has never wholesaled. So, the first question he did ask me is, well, why would you build your business around hedge funds? And number one, honestly, is just they pay more, right? They have a lot of capital. They have a asset that they are looking for, and they're willing to pay more than your average buyer, your average mom and pop flipper, your average mom and pop rental purchaser or buyer. And so for us, we have come across many deals that in my past I would have tried to sell to your mom and pop property buyer, but they just did not work. They couldn't come up with the funds or what have you. But I did switch to selling to these hedge funds again because they pay higher ARV. Why do they pay more? So again, the reasons why hedge funds pay more is because they are on a timeline, and kind of like the name says, they hedge their bets. So they're looking for a certain asset, and they understand if they can get a small discount on this group of assets, at the end of the day, they will reach the gross margins and profits on rentals that they're looking for. Right. And typically, as a hedge fund, they are in the 80% plus ARV range on these properties. Whereas if you're kind of working with your typical mom and pop, they could be more down in the 70, maybe pushing into 75% ARV. And a lot of times that just does not work, unfortunately. So, we try to get always to that 80%, 82, 83%, because that typically gives you enough to take to the seller. Now, Angel asked, okay, well, yeah, they pay more. But sometimes you can come across the one person that's looking for one property or one rental or what have you. Why not sell to them? And a lot of times the problem is reliability, right? When we are selling to hedge funds, we know that if we bring them an asset that they like, right, by knowing their buy box, we know that if they say they're going to buy the property, we go under contract with them, they will buy the property. And that's 99.9999% of the time. There are times where your mom and pop, for whatever reason, end up canceling contracts and don't fulfill the contract. And that can be to no fault to them. That can be to their own fault. But typically, as a mom and pop rental buyer, even fix and flipper, they are trying to acquire funds for that property in a couple of ways, right? They can go get a DSCR loan, which is a debt service cover ratio loan. They can try to get hard money if they want to go like the BRRRR route. They can have a bunch of cash piled up that they actually do decide to purchase the property with. But all of these aspects can change very quickly. You can have your lenders drop out, right? A lot of time a lender will approve you ahead of time when you're telling them you're going to look for properties. But then you do bring them that property, and all of a sudden your approvals are gone, and you no longer have access to those funds.
Why do approvals go wrong?
So why would an approval go wrong? So when you start working with lenders, you understand that they want to have you as their client. So when you first come to them, you don't have a property you're looking to buy. You tell them, hey, this is the price point I'm looking in. This is the type of asset I'm looking for, and this is maybe the discount I think I can get it at. As a lender, you want to say yes because you want them to work with you. But farther down the line, when you actually bring that asset to the table to them, maybe interest rates have gone up a little bit, the cost of money is a little more expensive, And at the time, the lender was like, yeah, most likely we'll get them through, so I'll just tell them yes. Well, you actually bring them the asset, and now they feel like they have you as a client, and now they're saying, oh, you know what, you need to bring actually a little more cash to the table to make this one happen. The price of money went up a little bit. So there's a couple of factors that lenders in the beginning might not underwrite on you at first, but then when they actually have an asset in front of them and they can do their full underwriting, they then realize that, oh no, sorry, we can't approve you. It actually happens a lot with retail buyers. Like, I'm going to buy my first primary residence. The lender says, oh yeah, you should have no problem. I don't see any issues with your statements or what have you. Go find the house you want, bring the house, and then we'll look at all your financial statements, right? Your credit checks, your banking statements, your W-2 work history. And then all of a sudden they say, oh shoot, no, sorry, we can't approve you anymore. Interest rates went up a little bit, which means the cost of money to you is too expensive. Your debt to income ratio does not suffice. With hedge funds, you don't have to deal with that. They have the cash ready to deploy. If the cost of money goes up a little bit, goes down a little bit, that doesn't affect them, right? Because they already have the capitals ready to deploy, and their goal is to start making money on that money as soon as possible, right? So the reliability factor is much higher. If they inspect the property, they have a final price, everything's in contract, good to go. Like I said, it's about a 99.9999% rate of close. And in my 5 years of selling to hedge funds, I've maybe had one drop off, not due to them, but as we were getting close to closing on the property, the tenants actually decided to destroy the property. The seller was having issues with the tenants. That's why they wanted to sell. They didn't have anyone that would purchase the property. I found a hedge fund to buy it for them. They were happy with it. Everything was good. They had to, unfortunately, evict the tenants. The tenants did not take that great and decided to do about $50,000 worth of damage. And unfortunately, that is something that will hurt the deal in any instance, right? So that's the only issue that I've come across. And again, it all made sense, right? They did not buy that property. And so that brings us to, our third point. They are buying much more, right? Most hedge funds, your big boys, they're buying probably a couple of hundred properties a month, right? Now, they often do sell properties as well, right? So a lot of times, they will have a group of assets. Maybe a couple are not performing as well as they would like to. So they might take those back to the market and sell back to your retail buyers, what have you, that makes sense for them. But they, every month, are buying hundreds and hundreds of properties, right? So the main difference, go ahead. So the purchasing habits do not fluctuate with the economy. The only thing that might fluctuate is how much they're willing to pay for the property, right? So as the economy gets stronger, maybe they do buy a little bit more. They maybe open up their buy box a little bit more. When the economy is maybe struggling a little bit, they might tighten their buy box a little bit. Possibly their gross rental yields might get a little bit stricter. But that's pretty much across the board with everyone. Theirs is just actually still a little looser though at the end of the day, right? As the economy goes down, your typical mom and pop that might be looking for one or two properties, they are either going to be very, very strict because the market's a little scared and they don't want to buy into a market that's going downhill. And also, they don't have the same data that a hedge fund has when it comes to where the market's headed. The hedge funds have all the data in the world, and they can pretty much, now no one can predict the market, but they have probably the best chance at predicting the market per se. And so as your mom and pop buyer, a lot of times when the economy is bad, they'll just step to the side and won't buy until they think the economy is good again, right? These hedge funds, again, they have to deploy the capital. They have to get it out there and they have to keep buying. They might just be a little more strict, but you can kind of see that coming. As a hedge fund, they have to spend the money, right? They have their SOPs in place with their investors that says we're going to deploy this much money in this amount of time. So in essence, you could have 100 mom and pop buyers that pause their buying, right? That don't want to buy that one property or even don't want to buy their 10th property. So in essence, if you have one hedge fund, that one hedge fund is going to be better than 100 mom and pop buyers, right? Because that hedge fund is still going to buy everything that they think is within their buy box that makes sense for them at any one point. So we get away from the 100 mom and pop, we go towards the one hedge fund, and that keeps us in the game, keeps us rolling, keeps the market moving for everybody, and kind of props it up. Again, they are just buying more. I would say, your average big boy hedge fund is buying a few hundred properties a month. So if one hedge fund is buying a few hundred properties a month, and you have 100 or so mom and pop buyers, and one is always in the market, and 100 mom and pops are sometimes in the market, sometimes not in the market, sometimes in the market, sometimes not in the market, reliability is huge. So, one of the main aspects that we want to stick to is performance. When I am talking to a seller and they are maybe struggling to pay their mortgage, or they're struggling to sell their house, but they need to sell the house now, and they're kind of running out of options, what can I provide to the seller that is the best for them? And typically it's just performing on the deal. So when I come to a seller, I say, hey, look, I know you're having trouble selling this. I know you've tried selling it on market. I know you pulled it off market. You thought about renting it, but now you're still open to selling it. And at the end of the day, you need to sell it. I want to make sure I perform for them. So when I tell them, hey, I have a couple of these buyers that we can show the house to. I know exactly which ones would like it. They're probably going to want it in this range. And if I come to an agreement with a seller, at the end of the day, the seller just wants me to perform. So I need a reliable buyer. And that's why, I've built, again, my business around hedge funds, because they're reliable, they pay more, and they're buying more. And so in this next video, we are going to talk about what it's like selling to hedge funds, right? Timelines, expectations, what they'll pay, things of that sort. So tune in. Until next time, thank you.